Hello and welcome to the 2016 Daily Orange Summer Men's Basketball Podcast. We're coming to you from Connecticut, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. We'll be talking NBA draft, Syracuse basketball recruiting, and some other things looking ahead to the year. We're about a week out from the NBA draft, so I guess we'll start off by relaying some of the questions we got over Twitter. We'll start with @TheRealAbs. Would it be more helpful for Malachi to be drafted by a contender or a rebuilding team? I think it'd be more helpful if he were drafted by a rebuilding team. He's projected to fall toward the back end of the lottery, middle of the first round, maybe even into the 20s. Some of those teams in there aren't really rebuilding as much. Denver Nuggets, Chicago Bulls, Memphis Grizzlies. Those teams are kind of on the fringe of the playoff picture, if not in it. I don't think he would contribute right away on one of those teams, but I think he could be a pretty solid bench player. It would obviously be more helpful if he was drafted to a rebuilding team, maybe like a Philadelphia at number 26 in the back end of the first round, because they really need shooters, and he's obviously that. But if he's drafted by a Memphis, who was reported today to have promised him a first-round selection at number 17, I think he could fit in well there. They're also a team that could use a nice shooter, and point guard Mike Conley is likely to be traded this offseason in free agency or sign with a different team per se, and he's currently their best offensive player. So he would fit in there, but I think, you can find your positives in both angles. Paul, what do you think?
I think it's probably better to go to a team that's a little, getting better, moving up the ranks. You never want to be a looter and a riot, and just kind of load up on points with a bad team. I think you want to have a chance to make a difference on a team that's contending. So I think where he slots right now, he's projected, right around that middle first round. I don't think he's going to end up in the lottery. There's some hype about it, but that kind of middle first round is probably a good spot because, like you say, he could be a bench player. He can get his minutes and then contribute on a team that's going to be playing in meaningful games. So like you said, there are pros and cons. If he's on a bad team, he can contribute, and if he's on a really good team, maybe he doesn't have as many opportunities. But I think as a player, any player, you want to be playing on a team that's winning.
Yeah, I would say almost out of principle, you're almost better off as an NBA draft prospect going to a team that maybe is in more of a rebuilding mode, where you are going to get more chances to play and kind of develop as a player, especially someone in Malachi's case, where you only played 1 year in college. And, as Matt kind of published on the Daily Orange's website, his pros and cons, the case for and against drafting Malachi Richardson. He's not the most well-rounded player in the draft. I really think if he does go to a team that's, lower to the pack in terms of, their overall talent, he's going to get more opportunities to play and kind of maybe, round into form as a little bit more complete of a player than if he goes to a team where he's just going to ride bench for a good portion of the beginning of his career.
Yeah, so if I had to, make a guess as to where specifically he'll fall, I would say somewhere right outside the lottery. I know there are rumors. I know Chad Ford said on his teleconference today that Richardson could go as high as number 10. I think that would be a little too high. There are other shooters in this draft. Obviously, Jamal Murray and Buddy Hield, Chris Dunn can shoot it, who are going to go in the top 10 without a doubt. I think Richardson, there's also a guy from Turkey named Furkan Korkmaz, I think I'm saying that right, who's the highest rated shooting guard in this draft. I think Richardson falls somewhere in that 15 to 18 range. If the report published on the Vertical today saying that, Memphis wouldn't let him pass at number 17, I think that's probably the most realistic landing spot. Like I said, their shooting guard right now, Tony Allen, not much of an offensive player. Not saying Malachi would start right away, but he would obviously give them something they don't really have at that shooting guard spot, which is a pure shooter. So I would have to say number 17 for Memphis if I had to choose.
And then moving on, talking about Michael Gbinije, Matt, you obviously beat writer for Syracuse last year, for covering the team. Where do you maybe see Gbinije fitting in?
I think playing in the 5-on-5 scrimmages at the Combine really helped him. those scrimmages are really only reserved for guys who are maybe fringe first and second round, but definite second round picks. Last year, only got 2 guys that ended up in the first round played in those 5-on-5 scrimmages, but I think he helped his stock more than anyone at the combine in terms of on-court stuff. He also had the fastest 3/4 court sprint, so that can't hurt. The sample size for what he can do offensively is kind of small just because he was really only the primary scorer on the team for 1 year, and he's only played point guard for 1 year, and it took him a little bit last season to really develop into a reliable point guard in the Atlantic Coast Conference. I think best case scenario, NBADraft.net has him going number 26 to Philadelphia. I think that's a little high. I see him slipping in, right at the beginning of the second round. I don't have a specific prediction to what team, but I think you do have to value his experience. Yes, he's 24. Yes, that might bring some drawbacks. Ben Simmons is 19 right now, so a team could get an extra 4 or 5 years out of drafting a younger guy. But in the beginning of that second round, I think some teams will look more for a guy that's ready, and Gbinije is as ready as he'll ever be, and a guy that can, contribute right away. And he's proven that over his 4 years in college, one of those being with Duke, that he can gradually improve. And I think he is ready to contribute, in whatever capacity. Maybe it's starting off in the D League at first, but I do think he contributes to an NBA team that takes him in the early second round this year.
And I know it spurred a discussion on Twitter, partly by our good friend Jesse Doherty, but going back to your story, Matt, about the stock or the case for Gbinije getting drafted, I think it merits a small discussion, and I'm curious to see what you guys think about his age and his experience, having played in college for that long, and he's not entering the draft as a teenager. Does that really help him as much, getting that experience in college where he's older than most other draft picks that are going to get taken in the early part of the first round?
I think the only reason it helps him more than it hurts him, I don't think it really elevates his stock that much. I would say it helps him a little bit more than it hurts him just because of where he's projected to be taken. Like I said, if Michael Gbinije's talent stocked up with a lottery pick, like a Buddy Hield. I know obviously Buddy Hield's younger than him. Michael Gbinije is 24. Obviously, a lot of graduates who are in this draft aren't that old. But like I said, this is, if I were the GM of an NBA team, which obviously I'm not, I'm sitting here in my room in Connecticut. But if I were a team in the second round, I'd be looking for maybe a guy that is ready to contribute right away, an experienced guy, because that first round pick that I would have made would be spent on a guy with, high potential. That's where you're willing to not take a risk, but, a guy like Brandon Ingram, Ben Simmons, those are raw guys who have obviously shown you a bunch of potential. But let's say a guy like Dragan Bender from Croatia or wherever he's from. That's a guy who, oozes potential, but he's not really proven against other NBA prospects. So that would be a guy that maybe take a risk on early in the first round just because of his upside. Gbinije, on the other hand, doesn't have as much upside, and not really a lot of guys when you get to the second round do. So that's why, Michael Burke, who also writes for us, pointed out a good stat. In the first half of the second round last year, there were 8 seniors and 2 juniors taken. So that's 2/3 of those picks for upperclassmen.
Mm-hmm.
There is some merit to that because, more experienced guys tend to fall off the board in the later parts of the draft. So that's the reason, kind of bringing it back around, why I think Gbinije is better off falling to a team in the really late portion of the first round or early second, because those are the ones that are more likely to, value his experience over some of the potential, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And go ahead.
One at a time.
I think, we don't necessarily know what the GMs are thinking, but by the same token, if you're in the second round, a lot of second-round draft picks in the NBA really don't work out. And Landry Fields was like an anomaly a few years ago with the Knicks. He didn't
who was picked right before Landry Fields to the same team? Andy Rattles, former Syracuse great, who's now playing in Azerbaijan or something. I don't know.
And a lot of second-round picks don't necessarily work out. So maybe why not take a shot at someone with sky-high potential who's 19 years old, and maybe they don't work out, but you take that shot there. So by the same token, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but it is definitely an interesting discussion, and where Gbinije falls, will kind of be almost like a litmus test of how teams stand on that.
Yeah, and just quickly piggybacking off the point you made, I think if you are a rebuilding team, you have that much more reason to take a chance on a guy with a lot more raw potential and raw talent where you can kind of watch him mold over a few years because you're not right around the corner from putting together the team you want to make a run at an NBA title. And I guess I will do the segue for us. We did get some tweeted in questions, and the one we wanted to take a stab at regarding this year's team is from AnteUp32, who says, who plays the 1 and 2 for Syracuse this year, assuming Tyler Lydon, Tyler Roberson, and Pascal Chukwu are locked in?
I would have to go. Well, first of all, my opinion is that Pascal Chukwu should be locked in. I don't know how willing Jim Boeheim is to take Daeron Coleman out of the starting lineup at the 5. I think it would be silly to, have the tallest player in program history who would be an absolute game changer on the defensive end. Still pretty raw offensively, I'd have to assume. But, I think you start Chukwu. But in backcourt, I think you go John Gillon, the Colorado State transfer, at the 1, over Frank Howard, and then Tyus Battle at the 2. Even though Tyus may be a little bit more of a 3, I know he's 6'6", but from what I've heard, he can really shoot the ball, and after Richardson left, that really opened the door for Tyus Battle. And, Tyler Lydon showed he can really excel at the 3. And you have a little bit deeper of a front court than last year, so Lydon will have to play the 4 and the 5 as much. So that's why I think Battle, falls down the ladder a bit to the 2. Then I think you start Gillon over Frank Howard simply because the past couple of years Jim Boeheim has shown he has an affinity for scoring point guards. You go back to Michael Carter-Williams, Tyler Ennis, not so much Caleb Joseph, and then Michael Gbinije. Gillon scored 13.5 points per game for Colorado State. Obviously not a great conference, but it's Mountain West. It's probably a tier outside the Power 5, maybe 2 tiers. But Frank Howard never showed that he could be a scorer. If he took a 10-foot floater last year, Boeheim yanked him from the game, at least at the beginning of when he started getting significant playing time. Frank Howard's a very smart guy. I know, Connor, you wrote a story on him at the beginning of last year. And he showed a real ability to pass the ball, especially down the stretch. And he handled the ball really well. Gave Michael Gbinije a chance to play off the ball toward the end of the season and into the tournament even. But I think at this point, you lose your top 3 scorers, Gbinije, Cooney, and Malachi, and you got to bring in a point guard who can score the ball, like you have the past couple years, excluding Caleb Joseph. So that's why I think you put Gillon in there, because he's an established scorer, albeit in a lesser conference, which Frank Howard hasn't shown yet. Frank Howard's still going to get, I think, 20, 25 minutes a game, whether that be at the 1 or the 2. But I think for now you start Gillon from the start of the season.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting parts, especially in the non-conference season to sort out. And definitely that backcourt situation is going to be one of those things that we're going to be watching, early on in the season. And Tyus Battle stepping into a really big spot. I mean, Malachi Richardson leaving for the NBA, and all of a sudden, you're throwing Tyus Battle right in there. So he's going to be in a big spot, and figuring out what Gillon can do is definitely going to be interesting to watch. I think that's something that all 3 of us are excited to see. What can he do? Because I don't know that many people that are watching Colorado State on a regular basis.
I watched like half their games last year.
So all your John Gillon questions, go to Matt Schneidman. He watched a lot of him last year, apparently.
Matt, that's what you were doing in the office all those days. But I think the front courts, like you mentioned, there's going to be a lot more depth. Lydon at the 3, I think Lydon's going to have a big year. He was really spectacular in the tournament, and not having him at the center position as much as he did, as much as he was there this past season, is probably going to help a lot. Having him more on the outside, getting him in some better spots for him. So it'll definitely be interesting. There's still a lot to figure out, but I think that it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I agree with the points both you, Paul, and Matt brought up. I think with the scoring production that Syracuse is losing with Malachi and Gbinije leaving, I think Boeheim is in a little bit of a bind where he almost is going to have to start John Gillon and just see what kind of scoring production he can get Syracuse. And if his scoring, proficiency kind of translates over into the ACC, which is a lot easier said than it is done. But I definitely think, Boeheim's going to take a chance with that. And agreeing with what Matt said earlier about Frank Howard, I do think Frank Howard is going to get significant minutes for Syracuse this year, and he did grow into the role. The more comfortable I feel like he got in it, he was able to kind of hone in his passing, which goes back to the story I wrote about. That's kind of a trademark of his game, is his ability to kind of read the floor and make good passes. And that was something I thought he really grew into as the year went on and he got more playing time. So, yeah.
I guess lastly, we'll touch on a little bit of recruiting. The hot button topic in Syracuse basketball recruiting right now is Victorian Thompson. And no one really knows what he's thinking, what his mom's thinking, if he's going to commit. Got a question from @AndreDre2514. Why hasn't Thompson committed yet? What is he looking for? This reminds me of Thomas Bryant thought we had him too. Yeah, I don't blame him. I think situations are a little bit different. From reports out there, it's been written that Thompson's mom has factored heavily in his recruitment, has wanted him to stay closer to home, has swayed him between a couple choices. Obviously, we're not sitting in the room with the Thompson family. We don't know how much of this is true. But my gut instinct is, the longer this drags on, the closer he goes to taking a postgraduate year. Matthew Moyer and Tyus Battle have been on Syracuse's campus for quite some time now, participating in workouts. And Thompson is supposedly down to Michigan State. Syracuse and Seton Hall recently took a visit to Michigan State. Syracuse could use him. He's a 6'10", 4-star power forward who would, give him a little bit more front court depth, which never hurts. I mean, they could obviously use backcourt depth more now, but he's obviously a high talent that would help them. But it almost reminds me, like we were talking about earlier, before we started recording, Robert Washington from last year. It just kind of dragged out football, that is. Just kind of dragged out, and he ended up not coming, and he's at Charlotte now, I think. So, it's a high-drama prospect, it seemed, just from how this saga has almost played out. And I'm not saying Syracuse would be better off not having him, but I'm thinking, if he does choose to go the postgraduate route, then Syracuse can reevaluate taking him in the class of 2017. It just seems like his, priorities need to get in order. Obviously, I'm not one to speak for him, but it just seems like, something needs to be sorted out on that end. We're not quite sure what it is.
Right, and the longer this drags out, the much less likely he is to come to Syracuse, no less any other Division I men's basketball program.
Yeah, I mean, I totally think, you guys are right on with that. Players, Matt, as you mentioned, players are on campus getting their workouts in and starting to get acclimated with college and, with their teams and getting ready and building up strength and all that stuff that, you do in the off-season to get ready. It's definitely an interesting situation to watch. If he commits to Syracuse, it couldn't hurt, but I think, the front court that Syracuse has right now, it's okay. I don't think it's great, but it'll definitely be worth watching over the next couple days or months or weeks. We don't even know when he's going to commit. So that's definitely the hot button topic right now.
And that's why we love it.
What do you have to say, Connor?
I said my 2 cents. I just think, very simply, the longer this goes out, the much less likely he is to come to Syracuse or any Division I program. So, with each passing day, stock down.
Fair enough. Well, that's all we've got for you today. We've got a big week coming up with continued NBA draft coverage. I'll be at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn next Thursday and on Wednesday for Media Day, so keep up with @DO Sports for our continued NBA draft coverage on Malachi and Michael Gbinije. Anything that happens with Victorian Thompson, we'll have you covered. And as always, feel free to shoot us any Syracuse basketball questions. We'll be happy to answer them. And stay tuned to DailyOrange.com. Even though it's the off-season, there's always stuff happening with Syracuse basketball. Thanks for tuning in.